De escuchar la palabra del señor secretario general de la Unión Internacional de las Telecomunicaciones, doctor Pekka Tarjan.
Excelentísimo Dr. Carlos Menem, Presidente de la República Argentina, Mr. Vice President of the United States, excelentísimos señores, señoras y señores, estimados amigos. Señor Presidente, en nombre de la UIT y en el de todas las delegaciones aquí presentes, deseo expresarle nuestro sincero agradecimiento por el honor que nos ha conferido al presidir esta ceremonia inaugural de nuestra histórica conferencia en esta hermosa ciudad de Buenos Aires, capital de su país. Esta conferencia mundial de desarrollo de las telecomunicaciones reúne a muchos de los pensadores más influyentes en la especialidad de desarrollo y nos da la ocasión de escucharles, aprender y compartir nuestra experiencia. Para la UIT, esta conferencia marca la mayoría de edad de su órgano más reciente, el sector de desarrollo de las telecomunicaciones, que puede ahora ocupar el lugar que por derecho le corresponde junto a los sectores de normalización de las telecomunicaciones y de radiocomunicaciones como uno de los tres pilares de la Unión. La conferencia es la culminación del proceso evolutivo que ha durado 40 años o más y en el que los miembros de la Unión aceptaron centrar su esfuerzo en extender los beneficios de la tecnología de las telecomunicaciones a todos los pueblos del mundo. El significado de esta conferencia es, sin embargo, mucho más amplio. La celebración de la conferencia pondrá las telecomunicaciones en el primer plano de la actualidad internacional, junto con temas como el entorno, los derechos humanos o la lucha contra la pobreza. Durante los 9 próximos días tendremos la señaladísima oportunidad de enviar un claro mensaje al mundo sobre las inmensas posibilidades que las telecomunicaciones ofrecen para promover el desarrollo económico, social y cultural. El problema que nos aguarda es velar porque las telecomunicaciones sigan teniendo un interés capital para quienes adopten las políticas mucho después de que la conferencia concluya. A este respecto, me complace sumamente que la conferencia se celebre en Argentina. Su país, señor presidente, no solamente nos atrae por su hermosa naturaleza y proverbial hospitalidad de sus habitantes, sino que es también para todos nosotros un ejemplo de lo que se puede conseguir en poco tiempo si existe un empeño común del Estado, los bancos y las empresas privadas en mejorar el nivel de las redes y los servicios de telecomunicaciones. Gracias a un proceso de reforma sectorial, privatización, liberalización del mercado, adopción de nuevas tecnologías y voluntad de inversión en la infraestructura, Argentina ha conseguido transformar su sector de telecomunicaciones. En sus 2 primeros años se instalaron unas 600.000 líneas nuevas. Este ritmo de crecimiento, que corresponde a los más rápidos del mundo, se obtuvo gracias a un importante aumento del nivel de la inversión, que ahora se sitúa por encima de 1.200 millones de dólares al año, o sea, el 50% aproximadamente de los ingresos. Tanto el Estado como sus nuevos asociados han conseguido con esta reforma un aumento de los ingresos fiscales y de los beneficios. El sector de las telecomunicaciones de Argentina está en primera fila de la reforma económica general, que ha dado al país un ritmo de crecimiento económico que se cuenta entre los más elevados de la región. Tendremos ocasión de ver durante esta conferencia que no se descuida en este proceso a las zonas rurales, ni se descartan otros asuntos de interés social. Prosigo en inglés. This year, 1994, marks the 10th anniversary of the report of the Independent Commission for Worldwide Telecommunications Development, The Missing Link. This report, which was commissioned by the ITU from a multidisciplinary group of independent experts, proved to be seminal in focusing the attention of policymakers on the telecommunication development gap between the industrialized countries and the developing world. As part of the preparations for this conference, the ITU Secretariat has prepared a new report, the World Telecommunication Development Report, published today, which traces the development of the telecommunications sector over the decade since the Missing Link report. The development gap is still very much in evidence. For instance, the 24 advanced industrialized democracies of the OECD account for 70% of global telephone mainlines, 80% of service revenues, and 90% of mobile phone subscribers, even though they are home to just 16% of the world's population. And more than 2/3 of households around the world still have no telephone. Nevertheless, the report concludes that the telecommunications development gap is narrowing, although at a much slower rate than had been hoped. Furthermore, new technologies that were barely available in 1984, digital switching, fiber optics, mobile communications, both terrestrial and satellite, are making the installation of high-performance telecommunication network much quicker, much easier, and in relative terms, much cheaper than ever before. But it is extremely important that we employ these new technologies to close the telecommunications development gap, not to widen it. Today, the talk is of information superhighways, and this has rightly captured the imagination of telecommunication policymakers and network developers. We are extremely privileged to have with us as our guest speaker today Vice President Al Gore of the United States, the godfather of the information superhighway. The ITU is founded on the principle of universality, and therefore the challenge is to extend this concept to become an international information infrastructure which will benefit mankind as a whole. And I'm convinced that Mr. Gore will agree. Since 1984, more than 200 million lines have been installed across the world. Many of the larger developing countries, such as China, Egypt, India, Indonesia, and Pakistan, are now emerging as major telecommunication markets and are attracting high levels of investment. Some of the smaller ones, such as Burkina Faso, the Maldives, or Nepal, have also sustained double-digit network growth rates over the last decade. Our report focuses on 4 countries from different parts of the world which have been particularly successful in promoting growth. And they are Botswana, Chile, the Republic of Korea, and Turkey. These case studies show that while there is no blueprint for success, there are certain common elements which are essential and which can be adopted by most developing countries, provided there is sufficient political will. In discussing the problems of the telecommunications development gap, it is all too easy to assume that it is an issue that mainly affects the developing countries. Certainly, it is the developing countries themselves that must play the major role in changing the situation through the establishment of new regulatory frameworks, through sector reform, and through accelerated investment programs. But, ladies and gentlemen, the development gap is a problem which affects us all. Narrowing the telecommunications development gap requires a global approach which recognizes the interdependent nature of the modern world. Many of the problems that face telecommunication policymakers today are fundamentally global, rather than national or regional in nature. Let me just take 3 examples. By the end of this decade, we could see the development of global mobile satellite services offering personal communication services to handheld receivers anywhere in the world. The promise of this technology is that it makes any locality potentially accessible to the global telecommunication network. But at the same time, it raises issues of global coordination, cooperation, and competition that have never before previously been faced. A second major policy issue is the reform of the accounting rate process. Accounting rate payments provide an important source of income to some of the developing countries, but they also tend to keep telephone charges to end users high, and they can act as a disincentive to economic efficiency. The challenge here is to reform the system while still maintaining the vital flow of investment funds to assist with network development. And thirdly, the liberalization of international trade in services, the rise of foreign direct investment, and the creation of inter-firm alliances have created a new set of global players in the international telecommunications market with revenues that are greater than those of many of the smaller nation states. How can we ensure that global corporations continue to work for the benefit of their customers as well as their shareholders? Globalization brings a new set of challenges to the system of intergovernmental regulation which has evolved for international telecommunications and radio communications. The ITU is founded on the principles of national sovereignty and universality and provides an appropriate forum for the discussion of these issues. A conference like this can ensure that the voices of the developing world are afforded equal weight alongside those of the industrialized nations and the global corporations. So what is this conference intended to achieve? I'd like to set 3 broad objectives which I feel are practical and achievable. First, to provide guidance to the ITU development sector on its future work program. Second, to increase awareness of the role of telecommunications in economic and social development. And third, to share our experiences as to what policies have proved the most effective in improving the provision of telecommunication networks and services. This conference does not have the power to establish the budget for these our activities. That is the role of the Plenipotentiary Conference, which meets in 6 months' time in Kyoto. But it is important that this conference provides a clear message to the Plenipotentiary Conference on the priorities for development and on the future role of the ITU development activities. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, back to Spanish. Para orientarles en esta importante labor les propongo varias observaciones. La misión de la UIT consiste en ofrecer a la comunidad internacional de las telecomunicaciones los productos y servicios que mejor puede proporcionar una organización internacional. Muchas de las actividades de cooperación técnica tradicionales de la BDT se ejecutan ahora a través de organismos de desarrollo o consultores del sector privado. Por otra parte, la función de la UIT en el intercambio de información y de conocimientos técnicos ha ganado con el tiempo mucha importancia, gracias en particular a la organización de cursillos, seminarios y conferencias como esta, a la compilación de indicadores de telecomunicaciones y la publicación de informes y a la organización de exposiciones y ferias comerciales como Africa Telecom 94, que se celebrará el mes próximo en el Cairo. Hasta hace poco solo se publicaba una pequeña parte del trabajo de la BDT, pero ponemos ahora empeño en cambiar esta política y en introducir una transparencia mayor en el funcionamiento del sector de desarrollo. Hay una demanda más importante que nunca de los servicios que la BDT puede ofrecer en materia de desarrollo de recursos humanos, asesoramiento sobre la reglamentación y política, identificación y definición de proyectos y reunión de planificadores de proyectos y posibles inversionistas. Para responder a esta nueva demanda, hemos de optimizar la utilización de los recursos de que la BDT dispone y desarrollar nuestras competencias básicas existentes. Por último, la BDT debe centrar una parte mayor de su actividad en las necesidades de los países menos adelantados. Uno de los claros mensajes del informe sobre el desarrollo mundial de las telecomunicaciones es que casi todos los países en desarrollo de ingresos medios están ahora en condiciones de obtener inversiones en el mercado comercial y de autofinanciar sus necesidades restantes. El esfuerzo de la BDT se debe, pues, concentrar en aquellos países donde son máximas las necesidades y mínimos los recursos disponibles. El segundo objetivo amplio de la conferencia es despertar la conciencia pública sobre los beneficios de la inversión en telecomunicaciones para la sociedad en su conjunto. Este mensaje se dirige no tanto a los ministerios nacionales de correos y telecomunicaciones, sino más bien a los ministerios de finanzas o de economía. A este respecto, la función de los representantes del sector privado, los usuarios de las telecomunicaciones y la prensa, que se unen a los miembros tradicionales de la UIT en esta conferencia, será capital para transmitir el mensaje sobre los beneficios que se pueden conseguir gracias a las telecomunicaciones. Esta es oficialmente la primera conferencia mundial de desarrollo de las telecomunicaciones y ofrece una oportunidad única en su género para inscribir las telecomunicaciones en los programas de política y presentarlas en las pantallas de televisión y en los diarios del mundo. Por último, el tercer objetivo amplio de la conferencia es escuchar, aprender y compartir nuestras experiencias entre países, entre los sectores público y privado y entre los profesionales de las telecomunicaciones y otros especialistas. El decenio de 1980 y los primeros años del decenio de 1990 han sido un periodo de experimentación sin precedentes de diferentes políticas y diferentes maneras de estructurar el sector de las telecomunicaciones. Incluso entre las naciones industrializadas no hay dos países que hayan seguido el mismo camino o avanzado al mismo ritmo. Aunque hay ciertos elementos cuya importancia se reconoce, como la competencia, la liberalización del mercado, la participación del sector privado, la reglamentación y el servicio universal. La combinación exacta de estos ingredientes varía considerablemente según los países. Es pues importante que hablemos con sinceridad y que escuchemos con mente abierta los éxitos y los fracasos de los últimos 10 años. Solo así aprenderemos de los demás y evitaremos repetir los errores ajenos. En la UIT hemos pasado por un proceso de reestructuración después de la conferencia de plenipotenciarios adicional que se reunió en diciembre de 1992. Uno de los objetivos principales de nuestra reestructuración era convertirnos en una organización a la escucha, atenta a los deseos de sus miembros y clientes y que responda a ellos. Así, animado por el espíritu de la nueva UIT, espero que se unan a mí para escuchar, aprender y compartir en el curso de esta histórica conferencia. Muchas gracias.
A continuación, se ha de escuchar la palabra del señor vicepresidente de los Estados Unidos de América, don Albert Gore.
Gracias. President Carlos Menem, my friend, Dr. Pekka Tariani, Foreign Minister Guido Di Tea, Jean Gibquep, Deputy Secretary General of the ITU, Oscar Felix Gonzalez, Subsecretary of Communications in Argentina, Domingo Cavallo, Argentine Minister of the Economy, Arnold Jiwatampu, Director of the Bureau of Telecommunications in Indonesia, Dr. Eduardo Bauza, Secretary General of the Presidency of Argentina, other distinguished guests, and ladies and gentlemen. I know that we all want to thank Argentina for hosting this conference in such a magnificent way with such wonderful hospitality. President Menem, we thank you very much. I have come here 8,000 kilometers from my home to ask you to help create a global information infrastructure. To explain why, I want to begin by reading you something that I first read in high school 30 years ago. By means of electricity, the world of matter has become a great nerve vibrating thousands of miles in a breathless point of time, the round globe is a vast brain instinct with intelligence. This was not the observation of a physicist or a neurologist. Instead, these visionary words were written in 1851 by Nathaniel Hawthorne, one of my country's greatest writers, who was inspired by the development of the telegraph. Much as Jules Verne foresaw submarines and moon landings, Hawthorne foresaw what we are now poised to bring into being. The ITU was created only 14 years later, in major part for the purpose of fostering an internationally compatible system of telegraphy. For almost 150 years, people have aspired to fulfill Hawthorne's vision, to wrap nerves of communications around the globe, linking all human knowledge. In this decade, at this conference, we now have at hand the technological breakthroughs and economic means to bring all of the communities of the world together. We now can at last create a planetary information network that transmits messages and images with the speed of light from the largest city to the smallest village on every continent. I am very proud to have the opportunity to address the first development conference of the ITU because President Clinton and I believe that an essential prerequisite to sustainable development for all members of the human family is the creation of this network of networks. To accomplish this purpose, legislators, regulators, and business people must do this: build and operate a global information infrastructure. This GII will circle the globe with information superhighways on which all people can travel. These superhighways, or more accurately, networks of distributed intelligence, will allow us to share information, to connect, and to communicate as a global community. From these connections, we will derive robust and sustainable economic progress, strong democracies, better solutions to global and local environmental challenges, improved health care, and ultimately, a greater sense of shared stewardship of our small planet. The global information infrastructure will help educate our children and allow us to exchange ideas within a community and among nations. It will be a means by which families and friends will transcend the barriers of time and distance. It will make possible a global information marketplace where consumers can buy or sell products. I ask you, the delegates to this conference, to set an ambitious agenda that will help all governments in their own sovereign nations and in international cooperation to build this global information infrastructure. For my country's part, I pledge our vigorous continued participation in achieving this goal in the development sector of the ITU, in other sectors, and in plenipotentiary gatherings of the ITU, and in bilateral discussions held by our Departments of State and Commerce and our Federal Communications Commission. The development of the GII must be a cooperative effort among governments and peoples. It cannot be dictated or built by a single country. It must be a democratic effort. And the distributed intelligence of the GII will spread participatory democracy. To illustrate why, I would like to use an example from computer science. In the past, all computers were huge mainframes with a single central processing unit, solving problems in sequence, one by one, each bit of information sent back and forth between the central processing unit and the vast field of memory surrounding it. Now we have massively parallel computers with hundreds or thousands of tiny self-contained processors distributed throughout the memory field, all interconnected, and together far more powerful and more versatile than even the most sophisticated single central processor, because they each solve a tiny piece of the problem simultaneously, and when all of the pieces are assembled, the problem is solved quickly. Similarly, the GII will be an assemblage of local, national, and regional networks that are not only like parallel computers, but in their most advanced state will in fact be a distributed parallel computer. In a sense, the GII will be a metaphor for democracy itself. Representative democracy does not work with an all-powerful central government arrogating all decisions to itself. That is why communism collapsed and is failing. Instead, representative democracy relies on the assumption that the best way for a nation to make its political decisions is for each citizen, the human equivalent of the self-contained processor, to have the power to control his or her own life. To do that, people must have available the information they need and be allowed to express their conclusions in free speech and in votes that are combined with those of millions of others. That's what guides the system as a whole. The GII will not only be a metaphor for a functioning democracy, it will in fact promote the functioning of democracy by greatly enhancing the participation of citizens in decision-making. And it will greatly promote the ability of nations to cooperate with one another. I see a new Athenian age of democracy forged in the fora the GII will create. The GII will be the key to economic growth for national and international economies. For us in the United States, the information infrastructure already is to the U.S. economy of the 1990s what transportation infrastructure was to the economy of the mid-20th century. The integration of computing and information networks into the economy makes U.S. manufacturing companies more productive, more competitive, and more adaptive to changing conditions. And it will do the same for the economies of other nations. These same technologies are also enabling the service sectors of the U.S. economy to grow, to increase their scale and productivity, and expand their range of product offerings and ability to respond to customer demands. Approximately 60% of all U.S. workers are now knowledge workers, people whose jobs depend on the information they generate and receive over our information infrastructure. As we create new jobs, 8 out of 10 are in information-intensive sectors of our economy. And these new jobs are usually well-paying jobs for financial analysts, computer programmers, and other educated workers. The global economy also will be driven by the growth of the information age. Hundreds of billions of dollars can be added to world growth if we commit to the GII. I fervently hope this conference will take full advantage of this potential for economic growth and not deny any country or community its right to participate in this growth. As the GII spreads, more and more people realize that information is a treasure that must be shared to become valuable. When two people communicate, they can each be enriched. And unlike with traditional resources, the more you share, the more you have. As Thomas Jefferson said, "He who receives an idea from me receives instruction himself without lessening mine, as he who lights his taper at home receives light without darkening me." Now, we all realize that even as we meet here, the global information infrastructure is being built, although many countries have yet to see any benefits at all. Digital telecommunications technology, fiber optics, and new high-capacity satellite systems are transforming telecommunications. And all over the world, under the seas and along the roads, pipelines, and railroads, companies are laying fiber optic cable that carries thousands of telephone calls per second over a single strand of glass. These developments are greatly reducing the cost of building the GII. In the past, it could take years to build a network linking a single country's major cities, might require laying thousands of kilometers of expensive wires, whereas today a single satellite and a few dozen ground stations can be installed in a few months at much lower cost. The economics of networks have changed so radically that the operation of a competitive private market can build much of the global information infrastructure. This is dependent, however, upon sensible regulation. Within the national boundaries of the United States, we aspire to build our information superhighways according to a set of principles that I outlined in January in California. The national information infrastructure, as we call it, will be built and maintained by the private sector. It will consist of hundreds of different networks run by different companies and using different technologies, all connected together in a giant network of networks, providing telephone and interactive digital video to almost every American. Our plan is based on 5 principles. First, encourage private investment. Second, promote competition. Third, create a flexible regulatory framework that can keep pace with rapid technological and market changes. Fourth, provide open access to the network for all information providers. And fifth, ensure universal service. Are these principles unique to the United States? Hardly. Many are accepted international principles endorsed by many of you. I believe these principles can inform and aid the development of the global information infrastructure, and I urge this conference to incorporate them as appropriate into the Buenos Aires Declaration, which will be drafted this week. Let me elaborate briefly on these principles. First, we propose that private investment and competition be the foundation for the development of the GII. In the United States, we are in the process of opening our communications markets to all domestic private participants. In recent years, many countries, particularly here in Latin America, have opted to privatize their state-owned telephone companies in order to obtain the benefits and incentives that drive competitive private enterprises, including innovation, increased investment, efficiency, and responsiveness to market needs. Adopting policies that allow increased private sector participation in the telecommunications sector has provided an enormous spur to telecommunications development in dozens of countries, including Argentina, Venezuela, Chile, and Mexico. I urge you to follow their lead. But privatization is not enough. Competition is needed as well. It did make sense in the past to have telecommunications monopolies. In many cases, the technology and the economies of scale meant that it was inefficient to build more than one network. In other cases, Finland, Canada, and the U.S., for example, national networks were built in the early part of this century by hundreds of small independent telephone companies and cooperatives. Today, there are many more technology options than in the past, and it is not only possible but desirable to have different companies running competing but interconnected networks, because competition is the best way to make the telecommunications sector more efficient, more innovative, and more profitable as consumers make more calls and prices decline. That is why allowing other companies to compete with AT&T, once the world's largest telephone monopoly, was so useful for the United States. Over the past 10 years, it has cut the cost of a long-distance telephone call in the United States by more than 50%. To promote competition and investment in global telecommunications, we need to adopt cost-based collection and accounting rates. Doing so will accelerate development of the GII. International standards to ensure interconnection and interoperability are needed as well. National networks must connect effectively with each other to make real the simple vision of linking schools, hospitals, businesses, and homes to a global information infrastructure. Hand in hand with the need for private investment and competition is the necessity of appropriate and flexible regulations developed by an authoritative regulatory body. In order for the private sector to invest and for initiatives opening a market to competition to be successful, it is necessary to create a regulatory environment that fosters and protects competition and private sector investments, while at the same time protecting consumers' interests. Without the protection of an independent regulator, a potential private investor would be hesitant to provide service in competition with the incumbent provider for fear that the incumbent's market power would not be adequately controlled. Decisions and the basis for making them must also be made public so that consumers and potential competitors are assured that their interests are being protected. This is why in the United States we have delegated significant regulatory powers to an independent agency, the Federal Communications Commission. This expert body is well equipped to make difficult technical decisions and to monitor in conjunction with the National Telecommunications and Information Administration and the Department of Justice changing market conditions. We commend this approach to you. I believe we need a flexible, effective system for resolution of international issues too, one that can keep up with the ever-accelerating pace of technological change. I understand that the ITU has just gone through a major reorganization designed to increase its effectiveness. This will enable the ITU, under the able leadership of Mr. Tariani, to streamline its operations and redirect resources to where they are needed most. This will ensure that the ITU can adapt to future and unimaginable technologies. Our fourth principle is open access. By this I mean that telephone and video network owners should charge non-discriminatory prices for access to their networks. This principle will guarantee every user of the GII can use thousands of different sources of information, video programming, electronic newspapers, computer bulletin boards from every country, in every language. With new technologies like direct broadcast satellites, a few networks will no longer be able to control your access to information as long as government policies permit new entrants into the information marketplace. Countries and companies will not be able to compete in the global economy if they cannot get access to up-to-date information, if they cannot communicate instantly with customers around the globe. Ready access to information is also essential for training the skilled workforce needed for high-tech industries. The countries that flourish in the 21st century will be those that have telecommunications policies and copyright laws that provide their citizens access to a wide choice of information services. Protecting intellectual property rights is absolutely essential. The final and most important principle is to ensure universal service so that the global information infrastructure is available to all members of our societies. Our goal is a kind of global conversation in which everyone who wants can have his or her say. We must ensure that whatever steps we take to expand our worldwide telecommunications infrastructure, we keep that goal in mind. Although the details of universal service will vary from country to country and from service to service, several aspects of universal service apply everywhere. Access clearly includes making service available at affordable prices to persons at all income levels. It also includes making high-quality service available regardless of geographic location or other restrictions such as disability. Constellations of hundreds of satellites in low Earth orbit may soon provide telephone or data services to any point on the globe. Such systems could make universal service both practical and affordable. An equally important part of universal access is teaching consumers how to use communications effectively. That means developing easy-to-use applications for a variety of contexts and teaching people how to use them. The most sophisticated and cost-efficient networks will be completely useless if users are unable to understand how to access and take full advantage of their offerings. Another dimension of universal service is the recognition that marketplace economics should not be the sole determinant of the reach of the information infrastructure. President Clinton and I have called for positive government action in the United States to extend the national information infrastructure to every classroom, library, hospital, and clinic in the United States by the end of this century. I want to urge that this conference include in its agenda for action a commitment to determine how every school and library in every country can be connected to the Internet, the world's largest computer network, in order to create a global digital library. Each library could maintain a server containing books and journals in electronic form, along with indexes to help users find other materials. As more and more information is stored electronically, this global library would become more and more useful. It would allow millions of students, scholars, and business people to find the information they need, whether it be in Albania or Ecuador. Private investment, competition, flexibility, open access, universal service. In addition to urging the delegates of this conference to adopt these principles as part of the Buenos Aires Declaration, guiding the next 4 years of telecommunications development, I assure you that the United States will be discussing in many fora, inside and outside the ITU, whether these principles might be usefully adopted by all countries. The commitment of all nations to enforcing regulatory regimes to build the GII is vital to world development and to many global social goals. But the power of the global information infrastructure will be diminished if it cannot reach large segments of the world population. We have heard together Dr. Tariani's eloquent speech setting forth the challenges we face. As he points out, the 24 countries of the OECD have only 16% of the world's population, but account for 70% of the global telephone main lines and 90% of mobile telephone subscribers. There are those who say the lack of economic development causes poor telecommunications. I believe they have it exactly backwards. A primitive telecommunication system causes poor economic development. So we cannot be complacent about the disparity between the high and low-income nations, whether in how many phones are available to people or in whether they have such new technologies as high-speed computer networks or video conferencing. The United States delegation is devoted to working with each of you at this conference to address the many problems that hinder development, and there are many. Financing is a problem in almost every country, even though telecommunications has proven itself to be an excellent investment. Even where telecommunications has been identified as a top development priority, countries lack trained personnel and up-to-date information, and in too many parts of the world, political unrest makes it difficult or impossible to maintain existing infrastructure, let alone lay new wire or deploy new capacity. How can we work together to overcome these hurdles? Let me mention just a few things industrialized countries can do to help. First, we can use the global information infrastructure for technical collaboration between industrialized nations and developing countries. All agencies of the U.S. government, for example, are potential sources of information and knowledge that can be freely shared with partners across the globe. The global information infrastructure can help development agencies link experts from every nation and enable them to solve common problems. For instance, the Pan American Health Organization has conducted hemisphere-wide teleconferences to present new methods to diagnose and prevent the spread of AIDS. Second, multilateral institutions like the World Bank can help nations finance the building of telecommunications infrastructure. Third, the U.S. can help provide the technical know-how needed to deploy and use these new technologies. USAID and U.S. businesses have helped the U.S. Telecommunications Training Institute train more than 3,500 telecommunications professionals from the developing world, including many in this room. In the future, USTTI plans also to help business people, bankers, farmers, and others from the developing world find ways that computer networking, wireless technology, satellites, video links, and other telecommunications technologies could improve their effectiveness and efficiency. I challenge other nations, the development banks, and the UN system to create similar training opportunities. The head of our Peace Corps, Carol Bellamy, intends to use Peace Corps volunteers both to help deploy telecommunications and computer systems and to find innovative uses for them. Here in Argentina, a Peace Corps volunteer is doing just that. To join the GII to the effort to protect and preserve the global environment, our administration will soon propose using satellite and personal communication technology to create a global network of environmental information. We will propose using the schools and students of the world to gather and study environmental information on a daily basis and communicate that data to the world through television. But regulatory reform must accompany this technical assistance and financial aid in order for it to work. This requires top-level leadership and commitment. Commitment to foster investment in telecommunications and commitment to adopt policies that ensure the rapid deployment and widespread use of the information infrastructure. I opened by quoting Nathaniel Hawthorne, who was inspired by Samuel Morse's invention of the telegraph. Morse was also a famous portrait artist in the United States. His portrait of President James Monroe hangs today in the White House. While Morse was working on a portrait of General Lafayette in Washington, his wife, who lived about 500 kilometers away, grew ill and died. But it took 7 days for the news to reach him. In his grief and remorse, he began to wonder if it were possible to erase barriers of time and space so that no one would be unable to reach a loved one in time of need. Pursuing this thought, he came to discover how to use electricity to convey messages, and so he invented the telegraph, and indirectly the ITU. The global information infrastructure offers instant communication to the great human family. It can provide us the information we need to dramatically improve the quality of their lives. By linking clinics and hospitals together, it will ensure that doctors treating patients have access to the best possible information on diseases and treatments. By providing early warning on natural disasters like volcanic eruptions, tsunamis, or typhoons, it can save the lives of thousands of people. By linking villages and towns, it can help people organize and work together to solve local and regional problems, ranging from improving water supplies to preventing deforestation. To promote, to protect, to preserve freedom and democracy, we must make telecommunications development an integral part of every nation's development. Each link we create strengthens the bonds of liberty and democracy around the world. By opening markets to stimulate the development of the global information infrastructure, we open lines of communication. By opening lines of communication, we open minds. This summer, for my country, cameras will bring the World Cup championship to well over 1 billion people. To those of you from the 23 visiting countries whose teams are in the finals, I wish you luck, although I'll be rooting for the home team. The global information infrastructure carries implications even more important than soccer. It has brought us images of earthquakes in California, of Boris Yeltsin on a tank in Red Square, of the effects of mortar shells in Sarajevo and Somalia, of the fall of the Berlin Wall. It has brought us images of war and peace and tragedy and joy in which we all can share. There is a Dutch relief worker named Wam Kot who has been broadcasting an electronic diary from Zagreb for more than a year and a half on the internet, sharing his observations of life in Croatia. After reading Kot's Croatian diary, people around the world began to send money for relief efforts. The result, 25 houses have been rebuilt in a town destroyed by war. Governments didn't do this, people did. But such events are the hope of the future. When I began proposing the NII in the United States, I said that my hope is that the United States, born in revolution, can lead the way to this new peaceful revolution. However, I believe we will reach our goal faster and with greater certainty if we walk down that path together. As Antonio Machado, the Spanish poet, once said, "Pathwalker, there is no path. We create the path as we walk." Let us build a global community in which the people of neighboring countries view each other not as potential enemies, but as potential partners, as members of the same family in the vast, increasingly interconnected human family. Let us seize this moment. Let us work to link the people of the world. Let us create this new path as we walk it together. Thank you.
A continuación, señoras y señores, para dejar inaugurada oficialmente la primera Conferencia Mundial de Desarrollo de las Telecomunicaciones, la palabra del señor Presidente de la Nación, Dr. Carlos Saúl Menem.
Señor Vicepresidente de Estados Unidos de Norteamérica, Doctor Al Gore, Señor Secretario General de la Unión Internacional de Telecomunicaciones, Doctor Pekka Tarjan, señores ministros, Su Excelencia Reverendísima Nuncio Apostólico, Monseñor Calabresi, señor Subsecretario de Comunicaciones de la República Argentina, doctor Oscar González, señor Vicesecretario General de la Unión Internacional de Telecomunicaciones, don Jean Giguet, señores embajadores, señores legisladores, autoridades de las Fuerzas Armadas y de Seguridad, delegaciones visitantes, ilustres personalidades, hermanas y hermanos del mundo. Es una satisfacción poder darles, en nombre de mi pueblo y de mi gobierno, la bienvenida a Buenos Aires a todos ustedes que han arribado desde todos los lugares del mundo para protagonizar esta primera conferencia mundial de desarrollo de las telecomunicaciones. Como argentinos, sentimos un doble orgullo. En primer lugar, por la distinción de haber sido elegidos como anfitriones de esta reunión y también por la oportunidad de mostrar al mundo nuestras realizaciones en la ardua tarea que hemos encarado de transformar el Estado y en particular de privatizar y desregular el sector de las comunicaciones. Ha sido una etapa esencial en nuestra política, modernizar las estructuras del país para afrontar con mejores armas el desafío del siglo XXI. Todo lo hemos hecho, lo hacemos y lo haremos pensando en las futuras generaciones. Por eso, el proceso de transformación llevado a cabo eludió todo tipo de especulaciones. Las especulaciones demagógicas, las dogmáticas y las limitaciones ideológicas. El pragmatismo logró quebrar el círculo vicioso que atrapaba nuestra economía. Utilizamos cirugía mayor para cortar de raíz las causas que habían permitido que el Estado monopolizara más de la mitad del Producto Bruto y ahogara las iniciativas del sector privado, absorbiendo los escasos recursos del sistema financiero. De un sector público ineficiente, hemos recobrado para el Estado el cumplimiento de funciones primordiales como justicia, salud pública, educación o seguridad. En el caso de los servicios públicos, hoy en manos privadas, los entes reguladores son árbitros de las contiendas y protectores de los usuarios, sobre todo cuando situaciones monopólicas u oligopólicas limitan la influencia moderadora de la competencia. Los primeros resultados se dieron justamente en las telecomunicaciones, que crecen vertiginosamente, impulsadas por inversiones y tecnología provenientes de los países más industrializados. Redes y centrales de última generación surgieron de las viejas estructuras por el empuje de un proceso transformador que en poco más de 3 años produjo cambios sorprendentes. La telefonía móvil es otro ejemplo. Su crecimiento superó con holgura las previsiones más optimistas de los operadores del área metropolitana. Y durante el curso de esta conferencia suscribiremos el contrato que extiende el servicio celular a toda la República Argentina. Mientras tanto, los pobladores del campo se han visto beneficiados por la ampliación y modernización de la telefonía rural. un satélite doméstico argentino, instalado y operado por capitales a riesgo, ha comenzado a servir al sur del continente. Y estamos a punto de llamar a licitación pública internacional para resolver el problema estructural de contralor del espectro radioeléctrico. Lo haremos bajo condiciones que equilibren las ventajas de los recursos, la tecnología y la habilidad gerencial del sector privado con el ejercicio pleno del poder de policía del Estado y de la soberanía y seguridad nacional. El crecimiento de las telecomunicaciones requiere algo más que ciencia y recursos. Es un arte que exige firmes convicciones políticas y el respaldo de la madura adhesión de los pueblos para estructurar un sistema sencillo y creíble que asegure la continuidad del marco jurídico implementado. Quienes estamos empeñados en dar la batalla contra el hambre, contra las enfermedades y contra el retraso cultural, debemos recurrir a soluciones imaginativas y audaces, consolidando la continuidad política, asegurando la estabilidad económica, logrando así un campo atractivo para los inversores que son un elemento indispensable para la prosperidad. Porque no hay progreso social sostenido sin el respaldo de una economía floreciente, de una economía sana. El área de las telecomunicaciones no es ajena a esta problemática. Todos ustedes lo saben muy bien. De allí que la Unión Internacional de Telecomunicaciones ha venido cumpliendo con gran dedicación la responsabilidad de administrar los escasos recursos de la comunidad internacional, tales como el espectro radioeléctrico y las órbitas satelitales, y elaborando las pautas internacionales para la normalización de equipos y sistemas. Esta conferencia debe ser el punto de partida para responsabilidades más trascendentes de la Unión Internacional de Telecomunicaciones en la búsqueda de respuestas a los problemas estructurales del crecimiento, tarea a la que debe abocarse de inmediato la Oficina de Desarrollo de las Telecomunicaciones. La tarea se centrará en dar un definitivo impulso al proceso de acercamiento entre los poseedores de las capacidades financieras, tecnológicas y gerenciales y los países que más lo necesitan para su crecimiento. El sueño, la utopía de construir un solo mundo con voces múltiples en el cual los beneficios de las telecomunicaciones sean una realidad para todos los hombres es el desafío que hoy nos convoca y nos convierte en protagonistas de esta conferencia. Este año, 1994, es el año mundial de las comunicaciones y quiero aprovechar al dirigirles estas palabras para reafirmar que las comunicaciones son un asunto de política y es la política, ese arte difícil y nobilísimo, la que debe dar las decisiones para que la comunicación se convierta en la vía regia que articule lo económico, lo social, lo cultural y lo científico-tecnológico. El ansia de nuestros pueblos por vivir en democracia debe llevarnos al compromiso de democratizar las comunicaciones. Y quiero ser bien claro, hablarles sin eufemismo, así como no hay paz sin justicia, no hay pueblos libres si el derecho a las comunicaciones no está garantizado. Este es un derecho natural, inalienable, que la comunidad internacional debe tomar como bandera y llevarlo a la victoria. Las telecomunicaciones y su democratización, para que no haya un solo ser humano incomunicado, debe representar para todos nosotros un valor, con el mismo valor de privilegio en el interés mundial como son la protección del medio ambiente, los derechos humanos, la superación de la pobreza, ya que las telecomunicaciones se han convertido en un elemento indispensable para denunciar, controlar, señalar las transgresiones, apoyar y dar eficiencia a todo lo que sucede en estos ámbitos. Al hacerme cargo de la primera magistratura de mi país, le señalé a mi pueblo, en momentos muy difíciles para la República Argentina: Argentina, levántate y anda. Y esta invocación, este ruego, esta convocatoria ha hecho que tengamos un nuevo país. Yo quiero agradecer muy sinceramente la participación de todos los países que han llegado a esta tierra argentina en esta conferencia que hace, reitero, al fascinante mundo de las telecomunicaciones. Y en ese agradecimiento, por supuesto, mi agradecimiento y la posibilidad de compartir totalmente con las esclarecidas expresiones que han vertido el señor secretario general de la Organización Internacional de Telecomunicaciones y el señor vicepresidente de los Estados Unidos. Por Dios, no dejemos pasar la oportunidad, esta gran oportunidad que tenemos desde hoy en más. La historia y nuestros hijos y los hijos de nuestros hijos nos agradecerán. De esta forma, y con el abrazo de todos los argentinos, pidiéndole a ustedes que se sientan como en vuestras propias tierras y que vean en cada uno de los habitantes de esta bendita patria, la patria argentina, verdaderos hermanos en esta lucha permanente e incesante para eliminar definitivamente del seno de nuestro planeta las guerras, los enfrentamientos, para levantar la bandera de la paz, de la esperanza, de la fe y del amor que todo lo puede. De esta forma declaro formalmente inaugurada la primera conferencia mundial del desarrollo de las telecomunicaciones. Muchísimas gracias. Que Dios los bendiga.
Inaugurando con sus palabras oficialmente la primera conferencia mundial de desarrollo de las telecomunicaciones, el señor presidente de la Nación.
Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, honorable colleagues, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I think it is appropriate, even at this stage, to extend, in line with what has been done by other delegations, the heartfelt gratitude to ITU and, of course, in particular to the government of Argentina for the great hospitality and great organization which we are experiencing here. Mr. President, if we were to take full responsibility for the effects of United States President Woodrow Wilson's declaration made over 75 years ago, that access to basic telecommunication services is a fundamental human right, then many of us would probably have to admit to having unknowingly at one time or another denied most, or at least some, or a few of our people of this basic
human rights. With the International Telecommunication Union as our collective conscience, however, the 1984 report of the Independent Commission for Worldwide Telecommunications Development, which Dr. Pekka Tarjanne last January at the 16th Annual Pacific Telecommunications Conference renamed as the Maitland Report, in honor of Sir Donald Maitland, Chairman of the Commission, this report gave us the basic tools with which to provide such access. Above all, it made governments and development agencies very conscious of their responsibilities to give high priority to investment in telecommunications and push the ITU deeper into its role as a catalyst to a viably accelerated change. In Malta, the government took the Maitland Report to heart, and we were fortunate in finding the ITU giving steady, solid support to our dreams of regaining a central role by converting our island into a hub for transport, communications, as an international business center, and as a center for telecommunication studies. The ITU Master Plan for Maltese telecommunications fleshed out the bones of our dreams. Through very capable human resources, and with government providing the capital and political will, these dreams have turned into reality. By 1990, the first phase of the plan was completed, and 2 years later, implementation of the second phase led to the country's full digitization. This state-of-the-art in infrastructure is capable of handling the needs of Malta's telecommunication development economy, of growing international finance and trading, important sources of revenue and employment, and providing a quantitative change in the nature of the service sector of the economy. By the early 1990s, as a result of the Nice Plenipotentiary Conference of 1989, the rapid technology and socio-economic developments brought about a radical change in the environment of the telecommunications sector. Green papers were prepared by the European region, by the African region, and parallel initiatives were taken in the Americas and in the Asia-Pacific region. In fact, the ITU sponsored regional development conferences held between 1990 and 1993, identified the real needs and formulated important recommendations. Malta responded to this change in environment by liberalizing subscribers' terminal equipment, granting licenses to private operators for the mobile cellular telephony network in Malta, for cable television, and for paging. We also responded by drafting legislation for the setting up of an independent regulatory body, eventually leading to the shedding of TeleMalta's monopoly, by establishing a cost-based tariff structure which reduced cross-subsidization of services, by establishing working relationships with various countries, and by contributing through the ITU towards telecommunication development in other countries. Malta's future activities are incorporated in its business plan for the period up to 1996, covering major projects including a Malta-Italy high-capacity submarine optic fiber cable, which we hope to have ready in about a year, and the agreement in respect of which will be signed only next Friday in Rome. An earth station and a new international telephone exchange, which will integrate signaling number 7 to serve as a platform for the eventual introduction of new and advanced services. The latest development in transmission technology, SDDH, will also be introduced. Before 1996, Malta is planning to introduce more advanced facilities, enhancing convergence of multimedia services. With the 2 documents from the World Telecommunication Advisory Committee and the Telecommunication Development Advisory Board, Visions of the Future and Partners in Development, ITU strategies have been well laid, emphasizing the establishment of sustainable development, not only within the telecommunications sector, but also within sectors to which telecommunications is a catalytic factor. Technological change is a cause and a consequence of social development, which fostered rapid penetration and widespread use of services. One of the latest technological developments is the Pan-European Digital Network of Integrated Services, URI 93, or the Information Superhighway of Europe, which has already penetrated 17 European countries, while similar information highways are being established in the United States, making possible synergic benefits through mutual cooperation between these regions. Malta is following closely these developments in order to link into the network at the appropriate stage. This World Conference will be approving a strategic framework to guide the activities of wider IDU family in the field of development, taking due consideration of the rapidly changing environment, limited resources, and high customer expectations. The telecommunications sector is expected to continue growing into the future at a fast pace due to the heavy dependence of modern industry upon telecommunication-intensive activities. The learning curve effect, technological developments, declining costs and prices, and of course, deregulation. Malta has been invited to this conference as a model of the synergic benefits of the close partnership between one country and ITU. The brochure, which we have had delivered to the various heads of delegations, in fact, briefly touches upon topics of progressive liberalization, of planning, partnership strategy. The liberalization process represents one of government's plans for an open, competitive, and technologically leading economy. This strategic planning is reflected in Malta's business plan, which includes the setting up of cost and profit centers, new products and services, high emphasis on customer orientation, supported by effective management development programs. The regulatory changes will promote an open market for telecommunication services, facilitating convergence, interconnection, and network expansion. The long-standing Malta-ITU partnership has always been active and mutually beneficial. In its intention to continue its partnership at a high profile, I would like to take and make use of this occasion here to announce Malta's invitation to host the next World Telecommunication Development Conference in 1998. May I assure you all that you shall be most welcome to share with us our experiences in the telecommunications sector. It will be a privilege and an honor to host such a conference, a very important meeting point for developing further the future of telecommunications around the world and into the next century. Thank you very much.
Tiene la palabra el señor delegado de Malta.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary General, distinguished colleagues, may I, on behalf of all the delegates present here, say these few words of gratitude. The time has come to bid farewell to the beautiful city of Buenos Aires. We have had the opportunity to walk its wide avenues and admire the excellence of its commercial establishments, which reflect the prosperity of the people of the country. We have visited the large and well-kept parks, which contribute to the quality of life in the country, and the beautiful historic buildings and monuments which are evidence of Argentina's great and advanced culture. The Tango Show and the Gaucho Festa gave us a sampling of Argentina's folklore. As mentioned by Dr. Pekka Tariane, from the moment we landed in Argentina, we were pampered by a people who are renowned for their hospitality. The presence of His Excellency, the President of Argentina, and the US Vice President, Mr. Al Gore, honored us at the opening session of our conference. His Excellency's most gracious hosting to the memorable and exquisite performance of the Romeo and Juliet at the world-renowned Colón Opera House manifested the strong sense of Argentina's commitment to harmonious telecommunications development. The Argentine organizers of the conference have certainly done a great job. In particular, I wish to mention my dear friend, Dr. Gabrielli, whom I had the honor to assist as Vice Chairman of the Support Group and Coordinating Committee of the conference in Geneva. Dr. Gabrielli has shown great professionality and dedication, which was a prime factor leading to the success of this conference. The sagacity of giving the ITU a new focus on the matters concerning strategic development and deregulation, as well as the establishment of the telecommunications development sector, which is a major pillar for the organization, has been proven. This combination of novel approaches will, through the outputs of this conference and the Kyoto Plenipotentiary, provide a most effective springboard for the global development of telecommunications in the coming years. The thanks and congratulations which I am conveying are not a formality, but an expression of heartfelt gratitude towards all contributors to the outstanding success of this conference. These include, amongst others, the Secretary General of Communications of Argentina, Dr. Oscar Gonzalez, who, with the able assistance of Mr. Lauyan, Mr. Escove, and Mr. Ehrenberg, guided the conference admirably well. The National Telecommunications of Argentina and all the respective staff. The Secretary General of the ITU, Dr. Pekka Tariane, the Director of the BDT, and the all ITU staff, officers of the conference, and contributors. Special mention, however, goes to Mr. Jose Escudero, head of the conference support facilities, whose inimitable style captured everyone's admiration. The interpreter's contribution is likewise laudable. Having prepared a well-thought action plan, we must, like audacious gauchos, spring into fast and decisive action during the coming 4 years, so that when we meet again for the next conference, we will be proud of having made a significant contribution to harmonious global telecommunications development. With this vision for the future, and as already announced, it pleases my government enormously to be able to host the next World Conference in 1998. While those of you who only know Malta statistically may wonder if you all fit in without falling off the edge of our tiny island. Those who have sampled our hospitality know that the welcome accorded to our visitors more than makes up for our physical size. It is time for adieu, and in 4 years' time it will be time for welcome. Many of you hopefully will visit us in between. I know of quite a few who will. For our welcome is so much faster than our farewell, a characteristic which parallels Shakespeare's comparison of time in the lines which he speaks through Ulysses in Troilus and Cressida. For time is like a fashionable host that slightly shakes his parting guest by the hand, and with his arms outstretched as he would fly, grasps in the comer, welcome ever smiles, and where farewell goes out sighing. Thank you all, dear friends and colleagues. I join other speakers in wishing you a safe journey home, back to your homeland, where you can continue to pursue the ideals of our noble organization, the International Telecommunications Union. See you all in Malta in 1998. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, señor delegado. Tiene la palabra el señor delegado de Malasia.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Of course, with the eloquence of our distinguished delegate from Maltese, I'm lost for words. However, on behalf of Malaysia and on behalf of my colleagues in the ASEAN countries, and of course on behalf of the Asia-Pacific countries with indulgence of these countries,
Estamos en el stand del Confer con el Ministro de Transportes y Comunicación, Samit Dimek. Hi, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Paul, and I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you. What are your views on this first Telecommunications Development Conference here in Buenos Aires?
Well, I think my first reaction is that I am very pleased to be here. This is a fantastic country, an enchanting one, where people are very hospitable to make things happen. And that is certainly a great ingredient in the very success of this conference. Referring to the conference directly, I believe it is a conference which places the correct emphasis on the correlation which exists between development and telecommunications. You cannot talk of a world which really develops, which develops economically, which develops financially, and which at the same time would not have the correct infrastructure for telecommunications. The conference gets together delegates from the various ITU member states, the International Telecommunication Union members, and in this regard, I think is proving to be a great success.
Do you have any specific role in the conference?
Yes, in fact, apart from participating in the conference as such, we have in this particular conference been asked to contribute to it as a role model. And this is in recognition of the close relations that exist between the International Telecommunication Union and Malta, and the fact, of course, that we have had a very accelerated pace of development in our telecommunications over the past 6 years. We have produced a brochure on the matter. This has been distributed to the various heads of delegations, and we are trying to indicate how a small country like Malta, provided that there is the correct political will and the necessary investment to follow up, can in fact transform a system of telecommunication from one which in fact now leads to being one that corresponds to all the needs of the people, that has the latest state-of-the-art technology, and that also incorporates the various added features that make our telecommunication system a reliable one in the light of what we would like to propose to the people.
So in fact, do you have future plans for the telecommunications in Malta?
Well, yes, I would say so. I think there is never a stage in telecommunication where one can stop. We have referred during this conference to the fact that over the past 6 years we switched over to a complete digital infrastructure.
Yeah.
And that was in fact the first country in Europe to do it. But that is not the end of the story. What we would like to do now is to keep enhancing our services. Our immediate objective, in fact, is even to enhance the various information services that are available. In this respect, I shall be going to Rome immediately after this conference for the signing of a fiber optic link between Malta and Italy. And we will also be making the transmission of data more easy by the end of the year through provision of packet switching services, apart from introducing in Malta a national radio paging service. Incidentally, with regard to this conference, I would like to say that we have also been able to contribute through the fact that Malta, through our General Manager, Tony De Bono, has been appointed as Vice President of the Finance Committee of this conference. He therefore also sits automatically on the steering committee. He has been able also to participate in various other events which are being held here. And we are very proud to be able to demonstrate in such an effective manner the ongoing good relations that exist between ITU and Malta.
So the second conference is going to be in 1998, that's right?
That's right, the second conference is going to be in 1998. I would like to state here that I had the opportunity during this conference to extend an invitation for the second conference to be held in Malta. I am very pleased that this has been very well received, in fact has been received with acclamation by the delegates present. And we are very much now working on making this dream, so to speak, a reality. Going back home, we'll start working on whatever is necessary to ensure that the next World Telecommunication Development Conference will be a success also in Malta. I would like perhaps to add a note on Malta-Argentina relations, if I may, at this stage. And coming here, I have myself been able to assess at closer range, so to speak, the excellent relations that exist between our respective countries. And I would also like to state that we have in the person of Mr. Solis, a very warm and excellent Consul General for Malta, who is precisely here also to promote, even in our absence, the best possible relations. I think these can grow. These can grow very much between our respective peoples, and I certainly hope that there will be more contacts between Malta and Buenos Aires.
Well, we are sure that Argentina is going to be in 1998 in Malta, and thank you very much for being here.
Yes. Thank you.